Hello. I want to begin by thanking everyone for inviting me to this amazing conference. I want to thank especially to John and to Danielle, Gillian, and the Galway team for making this possible. I am sorry that I cannot join you in person, but I hope that what I will be talking about will make a contribution. As you can see on the screen, that the focus here will be on diversity, dialogues, and social justice, with special reference to amplifying the voices of young people in the process. Next slide, please. The talk will focus on three specific questions, and each one will take about the same amount of time. And what you'll see is the first, what are some strategies for amplifying the voices of young people? And this really helps to lay the groundwork for the material that will follow. What are some strategies for amplifying the voices of young people in areas that are becoming more segregated and more diverse? It will present a case study from the US, which I hope will be relevant to you. And then finally, should a social agency have a strategy for youth empowerment? And if so, what should it be? Those are the three questions. So next slide, please. Okay, next. So for starters, I want to make a few assumptions. By young people, I'm referring to young people who are in middle adolescence, roughly teenagers, a transitional stage between childhood and adulthood, in which many adolescent psychologists would argue they are searching for their social identity. They are becoming more aware of inequities and discrimination in society. They want to do something about the injustices that they see. And they are very much oriented to social justice. And one reason why we choose to work with young people of adolescent age is that we know that they are more oriented at that age to social justice. And thus what they observe in their everyday life would be things like, hey, it's not fair. Okay, next slide, please. With reference to these mid-adolescents, I use the term participation and power in decision making. Amplifying the voices is really about the participation and power of young people in the decisions that they make that affect their lives. It's not about their passive presence and token roles in adult agencies. More on this in a bit. It is what has real effects in the process. It influences decisions and create change. So if your agency has a program that has youth empowerment, it is not the number of times they attend meetings or the number of times they speak, unless they have real effects on the process. Again, this is about engaging and empowering youth. Next slide, please. In the literature, this is consistent with the roles of youth in society. The first is that young people are resources and assets and strengths. We might view them as competent citizens and civic leaders with a right to participate and a responsibility to serve in their communities. That contrasts with another, perhaps more common view, which is young people are problems and needs. They are the people often labeled at risk or troubled and troubling, with limited resources. They're living in poverty. There's family instability. There are physical and mental disabilities. They are abused and neglected, fearful and anxious, and often withdrawn from the process of participation. They again are labeled at risk, and they are put in the position of passive recipients of services rather than as resources and assets. I would like to add here a third role of youth, and this is the role of youth as more than resources and more than problems. It's really about the fact that young people in society both have needs and problems, which require services. They also have resources and assets simultaneous to that when they are able to participate in the decisions that affect them. I recall a psychologist friend getting up in front of an audience of professionals and saying, I am depressed. And there was silence in the room. And then he said, but I also have power. I feel sad, but frankly, I'm on medication, and yet I still consider myself an asset, and I still am going to organize around the issues that affect me. I would call that a third view of the role of youth. And for those of us who are service providers, it really is quite a challenge because it suggests that we need to provide needed services in ways which are engaging and empowering of young people, not just one or the other. And for community organizers who are organizing in the community, for them, it's the notion that they need to be mindful of the personal needs. So what I am arguing here is young people can be viewed as both needy of services, but also ready for participation in society. Next slide, please. So what are some strategies for amplifying the voices of young people? This is largely from the literature on youth and community participation. Next slide. Here are some things that young people can do. They can engage in their established political and government. They can advocate around the issues they care about. They can organize for social action and then provide community services, or they can conduct community-based participatory research. I suspect that all of these are familiar to you, but what we know from the literature is that when young people utilize these strategies, it can contribute to their personal and social development. It can contribute to their sense of direction and power. It can contribute to their social connectedness and their health and well-being. If we care about the health and well-being of young people, I would add, we also should care about their engagement in the community, because this also contributes to their civic roles, to their democratic participation. And just to add, if you are part of a social agency and you have a group of active young people behind you, it can contribute to both providing you with more support in the community, because young people have far more power than anyone will allow. And it also will lead to better decisions by agencies because you'll have additional information. Next slide, please. This argument is also supported by the notion of the rights of the child. There are people in many of our communities who are not actively involved, and there are community members who don't think that young people should be actively involved. However, if you go to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, it tries to protect the rights of young people, such as in Article 12, where they say children are full-fledged persons with the right to express their views in all matters affecting them, and they have the right to participate in decision-making relevant to their lives and to influence decisions in their regard. This is very influential in the work that we do, and we know that it's their rights. And Article 15, that children have the right to express political opinions, to engage in political processes, to join associations, to assemble peacefully, to think for themselves, to say what they think, and then take action on their belief. Next slide, please. Here's a quote from some of our work. There is virtually no limit to what young people can do. There's no need that they cannot do something about. With a broad enough perspective, it's hard to think of a role that teenagers have not filled. They've led crusades, they've commanded armies, they've advised kings, they've been kings, they've made scientific discoveries. What youth can do is more limited by social and political convention, and now I would argue also by adult views of young people, than by their capacity, their energy, or their willingness. I would just say that the young people in your community, including the young people who are being treated for services that they need, are yearning to participate. They just are limited in the opportunities that they have. Next slide, please. So here's the second question that we pose. What are some strategies for amplifying the voices of young people in areas that are becoming more segregated and more diverse? Next slide, please. I want to begin by sharing with you a program with which I am closely involved and have been for almost 20 years now, in which roles I am a participant. I feel myself an ally of the youth with whom they work. I feel myself a partner with these young people, but I also am an observer. And it's not infrequently that I spend the day with young people, and then I go out to my car and start taking notes of about what I have seen. The first background of this program, Youth Dialogues and on Race and Ethnicity in Metropolitan Detroit, is that in the US, people of African, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Latin American descent are increasing and becoming the majority, while people of white Western European descent are decreasing and becoming the minority. People of color are increasing. People of white European descent are decreasing and becoming the minority. And this causes issues and incidents. Second, the unit of practice with which we are most familiar here is that society is becoming more segregated and more diverse, often at the metropolitan level, and we can point to examples of this all around the world. segregation, and diversity. This is what I would refer to as a unit of practice to the extent that it's not about segregation, it's not about diversity, it's about segregation and diversity simultaneously. Now, segregation results in issues, problems, disparities, discrimination. Diversity also intensifies incidents. In US schools that are in the innermost suburbs that have traditionally been white, students of color are moving in, and as they do, incidents and issues are arising. For example, what our young people tell us and what we observe is there's bigotry, there's hate speech, they are being threatened, harassed, intimidated, bullied, cyberbullied. A young woman called us from a rural area and told us, I uh, I am I am biracial. I am black and white. I'm one of the few in my school district. I woke up this morning and I logged on and I saw that my classmates had lynched me from a tree because of my race. Can you help me? These are obviously overt examples of bigotry, but there also is segregation that is subtle and microaggressions, like, why can't you remember my name? You can remember Mr. Smith's name, but why can't you remember? I keep telling you what my name is. That would be what we would call the microaggression. They're rampant. Then there are the segregationists and white supremacists who we hear a lot about. They are hate groups. I recall a recent example where white Americans were marching in the streets with torches singing, "The Jews will not replace us." Our observation again, young people want to communicate and collaborate. They do want to work on projects together. But segregation in their segregated schools and segregated communities limits them from doing this. Next slide, please. The objectives of this particular program, Youth Dialogues on Race and Ethnicity, is most of all, we want to increase youth dialogues among people who have racial and ethnic differences. We want them to build relationships with others who are different from them. Often, this is for the very first time. We want them to plan a project that challenges discrimination and creates change. This is good for their schools and it's good for their community agencies. We want them to be involved in public policy. And of course, we want adults to work closely with young people in a non-adultist way. Again, more on this as we move forward. Next slide, please. So here are the participants in our program. They are young people of diverse identities. They are usually 16 or 17 years old. They grow up in segregated schools, and they are all from the same metropolitan area. And they can recognize that it is a metropolitan area that is highly segregated. They are of African, Asian, again, white European, Middle Eastern, and Latin American descent. They care about issues. They care about immigration. They care about reproductive justice. They care about LGBT health and their rights. They care about honest sex education. They care about their curriculum because it doesn't represent them. It seems to be other people's curriculum. They also care about their schools and their education. They care about academic issues. They question teachers who are not using complete and accurate materials. Some of them in the poorest areas have unsafe buildings, unsanitary bathrooms, and schools where water is dripping through the roof, and in Michigan becomes ice in the bathroom. They are aware that their schools have problems. They are aware of disparities and inequalities. But again, segregation limits them. Our program is built on some particular roles that you will see here. First, schools and communities are our partners. And without them, the program would not be. We go to the schools and communities to ask them to identify the issues. We're a campus community partnership, but we don't think that the campus should be telling the community how to select the young people that they want to send to the program. Our program managers are all older graduate students, some doctoral students who have been writing their dissertations on this topic. And then a very important role are the facilitators. They are the undergrad, graduate students, and graduate students who are carefully trained and selected for their abilities to facilitate a conversation. There is no reason to expect young people who grow up in a segregated community to be able to have a conversation with other people who are not like them. And it would be a cruel joke to expect them to know how to do it. So we believe greatly in the notion of facilitation, and we carefully prepare facilitators as near peers to the young people. They are chosen because they are of the same racial and ethnic identity as the young people with whom they work. They are also chosen because they're a few years older and they can answer all kinds of questions that adults wouldn't be able to answer. And the anchors of this program are adults, public schools, community agencies, and I dare say the University of Michigan, of which I am a part, which is more than a university. It's the major employer in the area. It's when things happen at the university, it affects everything in the local area. University of Michigan is truly an anchor institution in this. And that's something about which we have to be very careful because most of our students will not go to a 4-year public university. They'll go to a 2-year college, or they'll go straight on to employment. So we're very careful about how we identify ourselves. Okay, next slide, please. I'm moving forward. I'll be done here in, probably about 8 or 10 minutes tops. The stages of the program for these young people is, and this is very quick, a whole curriculum is expressed here. Young people get started and build relationships among themselves. We call these intra-groups. So all of the young people who are of Latin American descent first meet among themselves and talk about their experiences of growing up in segregation with the facilitation by a near peer facilitator. We want them to talk among themselves, get comfortable, and build relationships, some of which, by the way, will be lasting a lifetime for them. We want them to learn, we want them then to come together with another group that is different from them. So, for example, you may now have a Latin American group of high school students meeting with an African American group of high school students. And when they talk together, They are creating a world that does not exist. They are asking each other about what do you have in your school? Why do you have bathrooms that work and we don't have bathrooms that are safe? Why do you have technology and we don't have any technology? Why do you drive to school in your own car and we have to take a bus system that is erratic and gets us to school late? And when we go get at school late, we get disciplined for it. They learn about each other, and that is something very new. They practice dialogue on hot topics. So they know what the hot topics are. They know that people are getting differential treatment by their schools. They know that they can't find themselves in the books. They know that there are people who are uh, calling names of LGBTQ young people. They practice dialogues on these topics with facilitation. These are the things that they are caring about. They tell us this, and we are helping them with dialogue. They then form alliances. The program forms alliances with other groups in the communities. They may be civil rights groups, they may be advocacy groups, they may be social justice groups, they may be racial and ethnic groups. They are our allies, and we work with them, but we don't always work together with them. We see them as allies. The young people then plan projects of their own choosing, which aim to create change. Next slide, please. Here are some of the projects that are coming up. And we, again, observe these over time because it's the young people themselves who are creating their own projects. They are forming groups like social justice groups or Middle Eastern groups or Asian American or South Asian or Indian groups. They are forming groups in their schools. They are talking in school assemblies and community meetings. For some of them, it's the first time they've ever stood up and talked about social justice in front of the other students. They are innovating by creating new courses on diversity and dialogue. Some of those courses with their curriculum have sustained themselves for 10 or more years. They know that their teachers need training, and we have school districts where young people from the program are conducting professional development courses for all teachers who are entering the employment during the school year. Research projects, public hearings, contacting officials, protest demonstrations. Speak for Yourself is a play, a performance that was created by the Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit, a largely Black performance group who listened carefully to the stereotypes they heard in the program and made a performance out of it. And that performance has now gone out to more than 100 school assemblies and community centers. And when it's over, the actors come to the front of the stage and have a speak out, talking with students in the room. I can very well remember a group of Black actors from Detroit talking about stereotypes in a classroom that was filled with 900 white students and one student of color. They also have written a book, My Dreams Are Not a Secret. They have dreams, but they don't talk about them. They see things, but they don't speak. And so some of them wrote a book. This book is available online, by the way, and if you want it, you can just let me know. And then finally, we have created a youthcivilrights.org. This is a website for young people in our segregated and diverse area to talk about the civil rights issues that they experience in their everyday lives. There are 20 to 30 videos, 5-minute videos made by young people. They're available online to you if you really want to get a sense of the young people in our program. Go to youthcivilrights.org. Next, please. I want to show you just a few photographs about the communities and the schools with which we work. And I want you to see some of the young people. These will go fast. At the top, a white neighborhood does not want Black community members moving in. We want white tenants in our white communities. And there you see the American flag. And when African Americans and also American Jews were unable to buy houses because the government refused to support them and provide loans and mortgages, the builder built a wall that is a mile long and 6 feet tall. They built a wall to segregate whites and non-whites. And then they gave mortgages. Next. Here are some young people on the Black side of the wall, standing and talking about what it's like to live in their community. You see, they can't see the other side of the wall. Next slide, please. We bring young people together around the issues that they care about. At the top is a march for equal housing that started in Detroit and went to Washington, D.C. Tens of thousands of people marched. And then our young people did a march themselves. And you can see below, those are some of our participants in the program. They walked down the main street talking and basically screaming to people about ending segregation. Next. Here they are in rooms with our instructors. On the left is an instructor who is a Latinx community organizer, one of the best, talking with them about community organizing. On the right is one of the co-directors of the program, who is talking with them about racism and racial discrimination. That's a very typical scene for our program. Next. Then we ask them to meet by themselves and to create programs which they think will affect segregation. Next. They're involved in highly experiential activities down below on the right. They are trying to figure out what a planning process looks like in terms of its steps. So there are their steps, which they've taped together. Next. Then they get together and they create plans for projects. Next. Then they present their projects to the other young people. And again, for some of them, this is the first time that they've talked publicly, but they are talking publicly about their communities and about their schools. And now they're talking about who in the community can help them and who in the community can help them with implementation. Next, please. This is the Mosaic Youth Theater, where African American youth actors are playing out the stereotypes of being white. That enables young people to talk about race and ethnicity, about racial and ethnic discrimination, and to do that as an ordinary part of their everyday lives. Their parents are not doing this, their teachers are not doing this, but they are doing it themselves. Next, please. They are marching in the streets. They are speaking in the legislature. Next. And here's a picture of one group, about 100 young people from metropolitan Detroit who are part of our program. I think, well, that'll give you a feel. And again, if you go to our website, you'll be able to see all of this. Why don't we jump ahead back to evaluation? The program has been evaluated. We've written about it, although this is not an academic program. This is a very practical program, but we also document it. We know that this program, and we have very strong empirical evidence, it helps young people know more about their racial and ethnic identity, to learn about people who are different, to learn about racism and racial discrimination, and it helps them to take action against these in their schools and communities. Next. You know what, Carmack? I think let's go forward two or three, so that we can, yeah, why don't we go a little bit further? Let me just jump now to the third question, and then we can open it up for questions. Hopefully, there's enough time to do this. Should a social agency have a strategy for youth empowerment? And if so, what would it take for a social agency? These are some observations. They are some illustrative elements. We are not trying to transport our program anywhere else but metropolitan Detroit and the state, Michigan, of which it is a part. On the other hand, we make observations that we think will cut across other societies, and we just want to toss these out so you can consider them, and then I'll be done. If your social agency wanted to move forward with a program on diversity, dialogue, and social justice, first, put a strategy together. The first rule of strategy is to have one. Reaffirm the mission in terms of health and well-being of young people, which includes both services and also empowerment, as is consistent with the World Health Organization definition of health. Make your programs more complete and accurate, not just services, but also youth engagement and youth empowerment, both services and empowerment. And one of the challenges for us in our school where we train social workers, how do you provide services as a form of empowerment so they are both the same? Agencies need structure, new units, or into existing units. Adult staff need professional development, and then young people themselves need education and training. Okay, one more. Oh, no, I don't think that we have it. All I would say is back to the original questions, which are, what are some strategies for amplifying the voices? What are some strategies in areas that are becoming more segregated and more diverse? And should a social agency have a strategy for youth empowerment? And if so, what should it be? Do you have any questions or comments? We have a few minutes to take, and I would certainly be happy to entertain them. This is a video which was made a couple of days ahead of the conference in the event that our technology didn't work. In the conference itself, I should be there. And while not face to face, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. With that, I want to thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to meeting you in face to face one of these days. I hope that we can answer any questions that you might have, and we're always looking for partners and collaborators. Thanks very much again for inviting me to this conference.